Paul, I have to ask you about this report. First off, by the Dallas Morning News, they obtained a record of a phone call between Washington State head coach Nick Rolovich and wide receiver Kassidy Woods. He was calling to inform his coach he'd be opting out over coronavirus concerns, and Rolovich said it was, quote, going to be an issue if Woods aligned with the Pac-12 Unity Group, which put out those list of demands the next day. I mean, what's the potential fallout from this situation?
Well, he's a first-year coach, and this is an extraordinarily bad start. It's hard to imagine, Hannah, without knowing more than what we know, to be any more tone-deaf to what is currently going on in this country. It's a terrible look. I think it will have a deleterious effect on him and his career moving up forward. And I think it will only embolden more young people to react and stand up, because if that's one of the leaders in intercollegiate athletics, we already knew we had problems. We have more serious problems than we thought.
And what are you hearing, Paul, about the overall response from school administrators and from athletic directors to these demands by the football players?
Really very little. I know it's still somewhat early on the West Coast. It's not that early. And the reaction has been very, very tepid. I don't think they really know what to do. Hannah, this is every administrator's worst nightmare, that football players, or any athletes for that matter, are going to stand up, become unified, and say, we're not going to take it anymore. I mean, there are so many issues that the NCAA and the folks that run college athletics have ignored for so long, and for too long, I should say, and I think it's now coming up back to bite them. And not only that, Hannah, with everything else that is going on, I think it has put this college football season literally on the brink of collapse. I know that everyone's still scheduling and moving dates around, but if these young people remain unified, it is going to cause serious problems, because I don't think there's much college athletics can do to satisfy them right now.
I just want to reiterate what you just said. Those words, on the brink, are very serious. We have been asking you almost daily, Paul, if you think the season is going to happen or not. Sometimes it looks better than others, but for you to get to this point where you really feel that the season is in jeopardy, is it because of the actions of these players in the Pac-12 that you think there will be a groundswell from other players and other conferences, which frankly make a lot more money than the Pac-12?
Exactly. And Hannah, I sat here a week ago today telling you there was some optimism out there. There isn't that optimism anymore. I mean, there's a lot of athletic directors just trying to sell people cautious optimism and quite frankly, BS. But what happened at the end of last week was very indicting of all this. The SEC of all conferences decided we're not even going to have our first game until September 26th. That means they're extremely concerned about a number of things, but in particular, what happens here in the next 2 to 3 weeks when students show up on campus. And if they get mass outbreaks, I think they're going to have to rethink the season. Right now, they are all these administrators are just diving in headfirst without a plan, without anything other than we're concerned about the student athlete. And you're hearing time and time again now that the players are not reacting. Caleb Farley, who came out the other day from Virginia Tech, he's going to be a #1 draft choice, said in an interview yesterday that he didn't feel safe in his own locker room. The players were going to the beach over the weekend. Nobody was wearing masks. I know the school has put out a statement disputing that today, but I tend to believe the player when he says something like that, especially one of the best players in the country.
Right. He has to individually make that choice to make his health paramount. And let me ask you this, going back to something you said a moment ago about football players being on campus as students are being brought back. We also have schools who are not bringing students back at all, like USC, for example. Is it reasonable for those schools to expect football players to come back and compete when their regular students aren't even going to be there?
I don't know how you can do that. There was a call that was reported in the Washington Post over the weekend about the SEC, Hannah, that an administrator on the call essentially said, he did say, the reason we're bringing students back is so we can have football. It's self-explanatory, and if you don't have a single student on your campus, how can you possibly call this amateur athletics? It's shameful. It's absolutely shameful that a school would try to do that.
They are student athletes as far as we know, and should be treated as all such students.
Right.
Very interesting to see what happens to the NCAA after this. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.